Zelensky just threatened to bomb the Kremlin, suggesting that Putin and other diplomats at the Kremlin should know where their bunkers are, because Ukraine is not just ready to take their land back, but they're now demanding Tomahawks from the United States. And boy, I'm going to break down a impressive Axios interview directly with Zelensky on what Zelensky's intentions are with his weapons. I'm going to give you a full update on this war, along with giving you an update on what's going on with Iran and their nuclear enrichment. Keep in mind that Iran is deathly afraid of the nuclear-armed Israel. Iran is a huge partner of Russia and therefore also China and North Korea. It's the axis of 4. Understand this. Iran and Russia just signed a deal to build 4 nuclear reactors in Iran. The idea is that these are supposed to be peaceful projects. Well, at the same time, the Washington Post is now reporting that Iran is increasing the enrichment, or at least the building out, and therefore likely the enrichment, of a mysterious underground site in the months since the U.S. and Israel pummeled these nuclear facilities. These are really big geopolitical updates here, right? So things are not getting better. Things are getting worse. We bombed Natanz, and Donald Trump argued that, not only are we going to end the war in Ukraine in 24 hours, but we've completely and utterly obliterated Iran's ability to enrich nuclear weapons. Really, because we attacked this Natanz enrichment facility right here with Tomahawk cruise missiles and GBU-57 bunker-busting bombs, including Fordo. But we did not at all attack Pickaxe Mountain, which is a 3-minute drive from the Natanz facility, which now, according to the Post's analysis and the satellite footage that you can see yourself right here, we see walls getting built out, another policy failure here, unfortunately, when it comes to foreign policy, of essentially Iran building, while at the same time, Russia is building up and buying patience. And now the question is, what's Zelensky demanding? Well, things that some say could lead to World War III. So put all this together and things are getting a little intense. But let's break this down. So we start with Zelensky, and let's break down his discussion with Axios. And then we'll come back to Iran, and we'll see how these are all related. So Zelensky sat down and said that the only reason Putin wanted to meet in person with Trump was to show the Russian people that they should continue to support the Russian war against Ukraine, to denazify Ukraine. Putin doesn't want to end the war. He doesn't want trilateral agreements or meetings. He simply wants a domestic supply, or rather domestic support for his war, and ultimately more delays from Donald Trump. And that's exactly what he's gotten from Donald Trump. Donald Trump in the last 9 months hasn't done essentially anything to end the war in Ukraine. The hope is that we'd be able to end it, but we're nowhere near any kind of deal. In fact, when we were told that Trump was going to negotiate with Iran, we never got any negotiations. We never got proof of utter obliteration. Instead, Iran is now rebuilding. It's the same thing with the meeting that Trump had with Putin. Oh, Putin's ready for a trilateral meeting. Come on, man. He just doesn't want you to impose oil sanctions, which you still haven't done. Congress is ready to pass 500% oil sanctions, secondary sanctions. Trump keeps adding 30 days, keeps buying more time for Putin. Zelensky, not everybody likes him. We know that. But he tells us that his position is very clear. We're not losing the war, but we're also not winning. He says we don't have enough weapons, drones, missiles, or air defenses. What we need to get Russia to capitulate are Tomahawk cruise missiles. Now, this is very interesting because it comes at the same time as the German chancellor. Actually, I think I have that right here. The German chancellor wrote an op-ed in the Financial Times demanding that we utilize Russian assets that we've seized from the Russians in Europe, and we end up providing, with those assets as a backing, a roughly $140 billion loan to Ukraine. Now, this is very interesting because if you look at it here, we've got 194 million or a million euros of assets that currently sit with the what is this? This is called the Euroclear, the Brussels-based financial firm who's holding these seized Russian assets. And Euroclear is really interesting because Euroclear has recently been reporting that they're increasing security at their facilities because they've seen mysterious drones starting to surveil, last in December, so it's maybe not super recent, but starting to surveil this building where Russian assets are expected to be seized and contained. So if you want to know where you got like $200 billion worth of Russian assets, maybe over here at this building. But anyway, the Chancellor of Germany is suggesting we should unlock a $140 billion loan to Ukraine using these Russian assets as collateral. The loan should be interest-free and should only be paid back by Ukraine once Russia repays Ukraine for the damage that Russia caused by invading Ukraine. Obviously, we don't see that happening anytime soon, but it's really interesting to see that Europe is talking about finding more ways to raise capital for Ukraine, while at the same time, now Ukraine is asking for, you guessed it, well, I already said it, Tomahawk cruise missiles. Now remember, Tomahawk cruise missiles, these can be countered by Patriot missiles, Phalanx systems. They can be countered by air defense systems, but usually the strategy with Tomahawks is you launch so many that you overwhelm your enemy's defenses. It's one of the reasons why when we launched Tomahawks from a nuclear submarine against the Natanz facility in Iran, we launched 30 at a time. We could use multiple submarines at a time and launch from these weapon bays, these jet-propulsed, if that's a word, weapon systems. They're really, really great systems. The thing about the Tomahawks, now mostly manufactured by Raytheon, is they can really be adapted to almost anything. You can adapt them to strike ships, you can adapt them to strike moving vehicles, adapt them to strike buildings. You could, incorporate them into, presumably, we don't have all the details of this military stuff, but presumably into AI software like what Palantir does, so that you're able to put together satellite data, drone data, on-the-ground data, data from tanks, data from ships, everything basically, to help these self-guided bombs hit their targets. So, the accuracy of these Tomahawks is insane. Laser guided, you name it. I know the chart here says 5 to 10 meters. They're much more accurate than that. That's 15 to 30 feet. That's missing by the size of a living room, right? It's the radius of roughly a 2-car garage. That's still pretty dang damaging, but they've gotten pretty dang good. So, these are subsonic missiles. They have quite the range. And one of the things that Zelensky is looking for is these weapons to threaten Russia, to get them to come to the negotiating table. That's what he wants. Now, Zelensky says if we had stronger weapons, we would use them to regain our territory. But he says he wouldn't use them right away. He says he would start by using them as a way to deter Russia from attacking Ukraine and bringing them to the negotiating table. Now, that's really interesting because if you think about this, you've actually got a Putin who has no interest at all in negotiating or ending this war. You have a Putin who probably does need a little bit of a, forced little kick in the butt to actually get him to the negotiating table. So he probably has a point here. Now, it's actually very interesting as we can also jump in here to Google Maps, and we could look at the capital here, Kiev, and we can go measure distance, and we could go run that to Moscow to see what the distance would be to the Kremlin. What you can actually find is that if you have a 1,500-mile range, that's 1,500-mile range, a Tomahawk cruise missile, you could, with that cruise missile, if you were so inclined, literally follow the driving distance from Kiev all the way to Moscow, and it would only take you 1,700 kilometers, which, mind you, if we go, 1,500 miles to KM, we're looking at 2,400 kilometers. We'd have another 700, 800, 900 kilometers of range on these Tomahawk missiles. But you don't even need to do that. You could fly there much quicker by flying, bird's eye view here, just 459 miles to go from Kiev to Moscow. Think about that. Zelensky openly asking now Trump for Tomahawk cruise missiles, and then saying Putin better know where his bomb shelters are, because we would be willing to strike deep inside of Russia to bring them to the negotiating table and end this war. Now, that's pretty remarkable, because so far, both the Biden administration and the Trump administration have rejected authorizing deep strikes into Russia, although some strikes into Russia have taken place, mostly CIA guided. The CIA works very heavily with Ukraine in guiding weapon systems, providing the authorization for weapon systems. But it's very obvious where the Kremlin is. And I can see, I can draw the dot right to the Kremlin. And here it is, 461 miles and a hair over here. Just drop in. Let's go visit. Wow. There you go. What we got? Let's go, oh, look at this. I didn't actually realize I could just Google Street View all this stuff. This is actually kind of cool. What, is this how Russia's going to counter us? The giant cannonball? But yeah, it's really interesting. So the whole compound's over here in the gardens or whatever else. This is really, it's not a big secret. So Zelensky is requesting these weapons. It's unclear whether or not he'll actually get these weapons, but there is talk that Donald Trump appears to be sort of walking away from supporting Ukraine to some extent. On one hand, he was anti-Ukraine and tired of all the death and dying, super pro, let's give Putin more time. Then he flip-flopped and said, maybe Ukraine will be able to get all of their land back and maybe more. That was his quote, and maybe more. Which suggests that Donald Trump is actually now fully supporting Ukraine, which is a total flip-flop. But the question then is this just verbal support? Or is he actually going to help more? What's he going to do? Well, that's a big question right now, since Tomahawks are American-made. They are used by the Royal Navy in Australia and the United Kingdom, but they're U.S. weapons. Poland's prime minister thinks that this is really just a shift of trying to push the burden to Europe, that Trump is like, yeah, go Ukraine. I'm not going to do anything about it. And he's kind of just sort of like walking himself out of this. The chancellor of Germany, in a Financial Times op-ed, somewhere in here, he actually literally has an opinion editorial today. And in that op-ed, not only does he talk about that 140 billion euro loan, I don't know where I put it. Not that it really mattered. But he talks about that $140 billion billion euro loan to Ukraine. He also talks about this idea about, now is really the time to push Putin to the negotiating table, because we're just not getting him there. And that's been a reality. Putin's done jackass in terms of wanting to end this war. If anything, he's entrenching himself. I hear this. He's entrenching himself with now building nuclear power plants in Iran, supporting Iran, but likely in the rebuilding of their facilities. Iran is rebuilding their offensive weapon launchers that were attacked by Israel. And now Iran knows how Israel's going to attack, where they're going to attack, how deep our GBU-57 bunker-busting bombs go, that they're going to be brought in via stealth bombers. Now, all of a sudden, Iran knows the playbook. They're just going to dig deeper and deeper and deeper and enrich the uranium they have. So we're losing here by doing nothing with Russia, and our attack against Iran now just fortified the very facilities that we can't touch and didn't touch. Look at this. More fortification over tunnel entrances, whether that's concrete or rocks. We have no idea, mind you, where 900 pounds of uranium enriched to 60% purity is. The IAEA International Atomic Energy Administration, says it's gone. It's disappeared. We've lost track of it, basically. We expect it's under Pickaxe Mountain, where they're purposefully trying to fortify it out now. More walls, deeper tunnel entrances, encased tunnel entrances. The expectation is that Iran has already resumed rebuilding missile production sites that Israel has taken out. And much of this material that's now missing is probably buried underground. Now, John Ratcliffe, who's just a shill of the administration, says that most of Iran's enriched uranium is trapped under the rubble at Esfahan and Fordo. But we saw plenty of trucks at Fordo and Esfahan before the attack. Most people with any ounce of logic expect that Iran already moved this material deep under the ground at other facilities that weren't struck. Here's that op-ed piece from Merz. Now, what was interesting about the op-ed piece was basically he highlights how we could use this loan to really help Ukraine win. But the big thing that he makes, the big argument that he makes in this, is that we have now an opportunity for change. Here's the line. Now is the moment to apply an effective lever that will disrupt the Russian president's cynical game of buying time and finally bring him to the negotiating table. Because, again, that's Putin's playbook, is, tell Trump how great he is, tell Trump how he's right, that the war would have never started if he were president, tell Trump that he's brilliant, and hug Trump, and go meet Trump in Alaska. Wow, you've got beautiful jets and beautiful planes. And the reality is, Putin gets to keep going with his war. So Zelensky was also asked about, hey, well, aren't lives going to be lost if we go attack to regain the territory that you want? And Zelensky says, with the capabilities we have today, yes, many lives will be lost to regain the Ukrainian territory. However, if the United States gives us better weapons, then maybe those lives don't need to be lost. So you can see where sort of, on the other hand, that manipulation of the Zelensky administration is coming in saying, hey, if you give us better bombs, maybe we can end this with fewer lives lost. And really what it is regain territory, but possibly also strike deep within Russia. The issue is, not only is Iran rebuilding for the next phase of their war with likely Israel or the United States. We don't know where that nuclear material went. But also, you've now got the potential that if Ukraine does get Tomahawks, they're going to launch these suckers deep into into Russia. And imagine the headlines. Imagine getting a news headline, whatever. Like here, imagine you come hold up Donald Trump's favorite paper, and you're like, Kremlin bombed by Ukraine, and you just see those images of the Kremlin damage. It's going to start raising some serious concerns over WW3. Well, there is some good news. You can get life insurance in as little as 5 minutes by going to meetkevin.com/life. That's MEET Kevin.com/life for a sponsor on life insurance. It's the same term life insurance that I use, and you can join that paid promotion. At meetkevin.com/life.
Knows about this.
We'll try a little advertising and see how it goes.
Congratulations, man. You have done so much. People love you. People look up to you.
Kevin Paffrath there, financial analyst and YouTuber. Meet Kevin. Always great to get your take.